Donna and Mark Winger met in early 1988. Their first meeting took place on a blind date. The young people liked each other and immediately began to meet. 6 months later, Mark made Donna a proposal to the heart and soul. The couple had a wedding in March 1989, a year after their meeting. The bride was 25 years old, and the groom was 26 years old. After the wedding, the newlyweds settled in Springfield, Illinois. Mark worked as an engineer at a nuclear power plant, and Donna worked as an operating nurse. Winger was considered an exemplary, successful, and respected family. The spouses fit each other perfectly. They planned to have children, but, unfortunately, years passed. Donna was already 30, but she still could not get pregnant. Doctors gave the woman a non-consolidation diagnosis of infertility. Mark and Donna were desperate. They did not want to accept the fact that a child's laughter would never be heard in their home. In 1995, a gynecologist at the Don Hospital reported that he had a young patient who was soon to give birth to an unwanted child and planned to abandon him. The gynecologist suggested that the infertile Donnie take the baby to himself and give him love and affection. Donna agreed. Mark supported his wife in this difficult decision. On June 1, 1995, Winger's wife and children's parents were named Bailey Elizabeth. At that time, Donna often visited her mother and father-in-law, who lived in Florida. In August 1995, she and Bailey also spent a few days with her relatives and then flew home. On August 23, when the plane landed at the International Airport in St. Louis, Missouri, Donna called a taxi to get to Springfield. This trip was a fatal one for the woman. The taxi driver was a young man named Roger Harrington. All 1.5 hours of the way, the taxi driver was speeding, was inattentive, and talked a lot. Roger admitted that while driving, he often talks to a godlike spirit named Dan. The guy said that sometimes, when he gets behind the wheel, this spirit comes to him, pulls him out of his body, and he rushes behind his car high in the sky. Roger also tried to flirt with Donna, assuring her that he loved older women and inviting her to take part in one of the swing parties that he often arranged in his apartment. After an hour and a half, the taxi finally arrived at the Winger family's house. Donna felt incredibly relieved, as she had spent the whole road in tension. Entering the house with Bailey in her arms, the woman immediately told her husband about the unpleasant trip, and later she wrote about this story in her personal diary. Mark didn't like the whole situation. The man filed a complaint with the company where the taxi driver, Roger Harrington, worked. Soon, this young employee lost his job. 6 days have passed. On August 29, 1995, 32-year-old Mark Winger was training on a treadmill in the basement of his house when he suddenly heard a deafening bang upstairs. The excited man immediately rushed to the children's room on the second floor to check if everything was in order with little Bailey. Fortunately, she slept soundly in her bed. Having made sure that everything was fine with his daughter, Mark discovered that his wife, Donna, was not with her. It seemed strange to him. Mark ran into the bedroom, took a gun, and went down to the first floor. Passing through the corridor, he heard strange sounds coming from the kitchen and went there. There, Mark saw a terrible picture. His wife, Donna, was lying motionless on the floor. A young man with a hammer in his hand was standing right above her and was going to strike again. Mark aimed and shot at a stranger. He turned to him in the face and wanted to attack the owners of the house. Then Mark pressed the trigger a second time. The criminal fell to the floor. At 4:27 p.m., A call was received to 911. Mark Winger told the dispatcher that he had shot a stranger who attacked his wife in their house. Hanging up the phone, the husband rushed to his wife but heard how a man lying next to him began to moan in pain. Angry Mark grabbed a hammer and struck the wounded criminal in the chest. When the police arrived at the scene, they found 31-year-old Donna Winger in a critical condition. The woman was hit on the head at least 7 times with a hammer. The attacker's pulse was barely felt, but he was also still alive. Before the doctors took the wounded to the hospital, one of the officers took several pictures of the Polaroid and was able to capture the position of Donna and her partner's bodies. The attacker died immediately after arriving at the hospital. Donna was not yet on the road. The woman never came to her senses and was unable to tell what happened in their house. Detective Charlie Cox, who was entrusted with investigating this case, first of all interrogated Mark Winger. The man confirmed that the .45 caliber gun found in the house really belonged to him. It was with this weapon that he shot the attacker who attacked Donna. When asked about the hammer, Mark said that he knew that this tool was on their kitchen table. Donna left it there as a reminder to her husband to nail a hanger for headdresses. Mark asked the name of the offender, but the detective kept silent. Then Mark clarified whether this man was Roger Harrington. And having received a confirmatory answer, Mark said, "Oh my God, this is the guy who has been chasing my wife for the past week." He told the policeman about his recent trip to his wife from the airport. This taxi driver scared her a lot, but it didn't end there. For 6 days, she received several strange phone calls and was sure that it was Roger who was calling her. The detectives found a diary of the deceased Don Winger, in which they read the description of that fatal taxi trip. Mark also reported that he called the company where Roger worked, after which the driver was fired. Perhaps that is why the taxi driver decided to take revenge on them. Mark Winger, confident that he would be charged with the deprivation of Roger Harrington's life, was very worried. But, in fact, the police considered him a victim. The investigation at the crime scene confirmed this. In Roger's car, parked at the Winger's house, they found a knife, a mount, and a note with Mark's full name, his home address, and the time, 16:30, when the crime took place. In addition, it turned out that several years ago, Roger was treated in a psychiatric clinic. Plus, Detective Charlie Cox had previously encountered this young man when he fought with his wife. "You stopped the criminal who wanted to take your wife's life. You are a real hero," said Detective Cox to Mark Winger. The next day after the crime, the prosecutor announced that Mark was acting for self-defense purposes and that no charges would be filed against him. The case was closed. Donna's parents were shocked by what had happened. They supported their son-in-law as best they could, who has now become a widow. The entire Springfield community came to the rescue of the father of a single woman, who lost his beloved wife and mother, Bailey. Everyone believed that he was an excellent family man whose life was destroyed by some crazy taxi driver. Everyone, except for Harrington's family. Knowing Roger better than anyone else, his sister-in-law, Barbara, assured the police that her brother would never have committed such a heinous act. She begged the detectives to resume the investigation, but they refused. Roger's mother, Helen, was afraid to go out, as the whole city thought that she had raised a psychopathic criminal. The entire Harrington family mourned quietly, being sure that no one would support them. However, they were not alone in their doubts. Detective Doug Williamson, who was also involved in this case, had some suspicions. Something, in his opinion, did not match the picture of events described by Mark Winger. But besides Williamson, no one else wanted to dig into this obvious incident. The detective was refused permission by the police chief to continue the investigation. The case remained closed. After Donna died, Mark continued to take care of their adopted daughter, Bailey. But it was getting more and more difficult to deal with all the cases alone. Therefore, 5 months after his wife's death, the widow hired an assistant, a nanny named Rebecca Simmick. Mark and Rebecca fell in love with each other, and soon the woman found out that she was pregnant. 9 months later, the couple had a daughter, Anna. Almost immediately after that, the newlyweds got married. A year later, Mark sold the house and cut off all ties with his late wife's relatives. He, together with Rebecca, Bailey, and Anna, moved to the suburbs of Springfield. A little later, 2 more children were born in their family, Maggie and Ben. Their lives would have gone on if it had not been for the confession of a close friend, Donna Schultz. For 4 years, Donna Schultz kept a secret that caused her anxiety and destroyed her from the inside. In the end, the woman could not stand it and went to the police. She told me that there was a secret romance between her and Mark Winger, which began a few months before Donna's death and lasted a few more weeks after the woman's death. Dana claimed that Mark wanted to get married so badly that he once said that it would be much easier for us to be together if Donna just didn't. Also, Donna said that Mark carefully thought over options on how to get rid of his wife and even offered his mistress to become a participant in the conspiracy. He just couldn't divorce, as he was afraid to lose his adopted daughter. By this time, Detective Charlie Cox no longer felt absolute confidence in Mark's innocence. Doubts have arisen since the moment when, a few months after Donna's funeral, Mark came to the police station and asked to return his gun. Then he asked the detective if there was any new information on the case. Detective Cox considered this question strange since the investigation had long been over. The second time, Mark visited the detective to report that he was marrying his daughter's nanny. Mark continued to visit the police station, and Detective Cox realized that the widow was trying to find out if the investigation was being carried out. After the confession of Donna's close friend, Mark Winger was again called to the police. The man did not hide that he really was cheating on the country, but he called other accusations of Dan Schultz a terrible, terrible lie. "I was a good husband to Donna," said Wenger. "I made a mistake when I started cheating on my wife with her girlfriend. It was stupid and wrong, but I'm just a person, and people are prone to making mistakes." Mark also denied that he asked Detective Cox about the case of his deceased wife to bring justice for the death of Dawn and for the actions of their taxi driver. In this regard, Mark's lawyer asked him to hand over files containing evidence and other documents relating to the case. However, it turned out that in 4 years, some materials were lost. But photos of Dawn and Roger, taken on the old Polaroid, were found on that bad day. The position of the bodies in the photos did not correspond to what Mark described in the interrogation. Later, Detective Charlie Cox stated that these photos were not previously studied because he did not even know about their existence. The photo of Donna was face down, although her husband said that he was holding his wife in his arms and trying to help. Having made a painful confession that they failed the investigation in 1995, the police, with incredible excitement, resumed their work with incredible excitement. Detectives found more and more compromising evidence. Roger's neighbor, Susan Collins, told her that she heard Roger agreeing to meet with someone the day before the incident. This explained the contents of a note found in the taxi driver's car. Susan added that Roger told her in the taxi driver's car. Susan added that Roger told her about the upcoming meeting with Mark. He agreed to go to him to figure it out in everything, including the dismissal situation. The guy left the house at 15:30. Roger had a knife and a mounting in his car. If he had planned to commit murder in advance, why didn't he take something like this with him instead of using a hammer? Could he have assumed that the appropriate weapon would be in his hand? During a call at 911, Mark Winger said that an unfamiliar man attacked his wife, but he himself called the policeman the attacker. The owner of the taxi company said that during the call, Mark complained to the driver and demanded a personal meeting with Roger. Usually, customers do not do this. They simply report their claims to management. But Mark insisted on meeting. Rogers himself wanted to figure it out, so he asked the boss to give the caller his phone number. The expert criminalist ruled that the splashes on Mark's clothes correspond to the assumption that it was he who struck with a hammer. Harrington's clothes had no traces of Don's blood. A woman's diary about a strange taxi ride was made into handwriting similar to Don's handwriting. It turned out that this note was not written by hand. The expert confirmed that this is Mark's handwriting. 6 years after the murder, in 2001, Mark Winger was arrested and put in prison, awaiting trial. Detective Charlie Cox, who once called him a hero, was now full of determination to prove that Mark was a cold-blooded criminal. The new theory was that Don's unpleasant trip with Roger inspired Mark to plan his wife's murder and, at the same time, the murder of the taxi driver, so that the whole story seemed more plausible. Don's parents understood that the evidence against their ex-son-in-law was convincing but still hoped that he would be somehow justified. They refused to believe that he was the one who committed the murder. After 13 hours of discussion, the jury returned with the verdict that Mark Winger was guilty of the murder of two people, Donnie Winger and Roger Harrington. In August 2002, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The defendant did not admit his guilt. 4 years later, in 2006, Mark Winger was charged with attempting to hire another prisoner to commit 2 more serious crimes. Mark tried to persuade 44-year-old cellmate Terry Hubble to help him kill Donna's friend, Dana Schultz, for giving testimony against him. Also, Mark wanted to punish Jeffrey Gelman, his childhood friend, for refusing to pay him $1 million in bail when he was arrested. In Mark's cell, the guards found 19 pages of handwritten text with an explanation of the plan of action. The man wanted his accomplice to use his connections in the criminal world to organize the kidnapping of his childhood friend, Jeffrey Gelman, in order to receive a ransom from his family. When the money was received, Mark would order to kill Jeffrey and hire the same performer, who would deprive Donna's friend, Donna Schultz, of her life. And before that, he makes her write a statement that she had set up Mark Winger, and in fact, he is not guilty. The insidious conspiracy failed, and Mark Winger, in June 2007, was again on the bench of the defendants. Mark convinced the jury that his fantasy, which he never planned to implement, was simply laid out in the manuscripts. However, he was found guilty of incitement to kidnapping and murdering several people and sentenced to 35 years in prison in addition to the already existing life sentence. It is known that Rebecca, the second wife of Mark, divorced the man immediately after his imprisonment. She gave her maiden name Simic back to her. The woman officially adopted Bailey, the adopted daughter of Mark and Donna. For the first time, Rebecca moved to live with her brother. She had neither a house, nor money, nor means. When the woman improved her financial situation, she rented a separate house for herself and her children and raised her daughter and son alone. Rebecca and the children joined the Southeastern Christian Church. Now that the woman works and has a good income, she never gets married again. In one of the last interviews in 2021, Rebecca admitted, "When Mark was put in prison, I felt humiliated. I was embarrassed and ashamed, although I did nothing wrong. Now Mark is alive, but he is dead to me and my family." Thank you for watching.